Hello and welcome to etbfsi.com. My name is Amol Dete and I'm in conversation with N. Kamakodi, the MD and CEO of City Union Bank. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, my immediate and a very basic question to you. That is the question, in fact, I'm asking to all the bankers today because we have seen, a substantial growth in the last quarter, but that was the third quarter. And the fourth quarter is just like a few days away. But if you could tell me a perspective on how the March quarter is looking for you specifically and the industry, because that is a big worry for the entire banking sector.
If you had a chance to look into our investor communication, even for the third quarter for the financial year 20, in fact, in February 2020, even before the onset of COVID, we said we are taking our legs off the growth pedal because we were not fully comfortable with the way the things were panning out at that particular point of time. So after the onset of COVID also, we clearly communicated that growth is not going to be the priority at that point of time till at least things come back to the normalcy. And along with our quarterly results, we had put it in public domain that we may be having our growth rate mid to high single digit for the financial year the 2021. And we feel we should be able to achieve whatever we have communicated in terms of growth. Honestly speaking, in this year, the bulk of the growth has basically come from two segments. One is the ECLGS scheme, and the second one is the gold loan, for which the LTV and all were fine-tuned because of taking into account the COVID pandemic and all. Looking into all such things, we hope we should be in a position to achieve the growth figures which we shared with the market at large during your earlier quarterly results calls.
But one important question, since we are obviously reading the reports of the rating agencies and also many analytics and also seen a significant numbers in the bank's results. My question to you, sir, where is the credit demand now coming from specifically? Obviously, we are still seeing the stress in one or two very, very crucial sectors because of the lockdown. But where is the majority of the demand coming from now?
Basically, for the financial year 2021, nobody talked about the growth. Okay, you had, like say, reasonable growth at the consumption sector, particularly small ticket consumption loans and personal loans and all was one segment which was growing reasonably high. But our focus had always been lending for the creation of the business assets. And the focus was more towards almost for the entire businesses per se, the entire financial year 2021 was for, like say, protecting the health of the businesses rather than the growth. You had almost 2-3 months of lockdown when the fixed expenditure was there, but the income or cash inflow was not there, and there was a huge cash flow mismatch. Almost around the same time last year, in the month of, like say, April, May, and all, bulk of the like say the ECLGS loan and all actually kickstarted the activities at that particular point of time. Now only we are clearly able to see, when you talk to the particularly small and medium scale businesses, that some amount of confidence is back. More than 90% of the businesses have come back to the 90% of the pre-COVID level. How we look into is that the by and large, the total sales of financial year 21-22 will be almost equal to the financial year 19-20, as you will be having 2021 is a year when you will see a dip because you had almost 3-4 months when there was absolutely no activity. So the investment for like say capacity building, particularly to increase the capacity of the businesses, will start only when the existing capacity gets like say almost fully utilized. We expect that will start only from the second half of the financial year 21-22.
Could you also, sir, add more specifically on the ECL, GC, and the gold loan? What kind of demand are you seeing there? Obviously, growth is a different aspect altogether. But have we reached or have we crossed the pre-COVID level?
In, for example, the ECLGS scheme, basically the small and medium scale enterprises with certain conditions, they were given, like say, up to 20% of their outstanding during the pre-COVID period. which means that, like say, by and large, 1 year of enhancement is, or 1.5 years of enhancement in credit exposure had been given upfront. That is the way we have to look into that particular segment per se. So that has, if that ECLGS scheme had not been given, all the exposures would have been fully utilized and the activity levels would have got somewhat jammed. But this incremental exposure had ensured that the flow of cash from businesses between the businesses started in a smoother way, so that the overall activity had, like say, reasonably coming back to the pre-COVID level.
Okay, that's interesting, sir. I also wants to, understand from you, most of the banks, I mean, almost all the banks have, reduced the auto loans, I mean, specifically the retail loans, and they're also negotiating a lot with the corporates, whoever is coming for a loan. My question to you, sir, is the demand currently, whatever the demand is right now, or whatever the pickup that we are seeing in the demand, is it due to the low interest rate offered by the bank, or do you see a genuine pickup in the economy?
There is definitely a genuine pickup in the economy, but understand the base level properly. So if you take the financial year 1920, financial year 1920, you had COVID probably towards the last 3 weeks of that financial year. In otherwise, we can virtually say that financial year 1920 did not have impact of the COVID. So after the onset of, like say, new financial year 2021, you had almost 2-3 months of complete lockdown where there was absolutely no activity. By and large, you also hear that you had about 10% shrinkage, 20% shrinkage on a monthly level and all. But overall, the turnover or activity level for the financial year 2021 vis-a-vis the financial year 1920, you had close to say 10% reduction in the overall activity level and overall production. So even if at a normal rate currently, the overall activity level, even though it will be like say 10% over and above the, for financial year 21-22 will be 10% over and above the financial year 1920, still you won't see much improvement over and above your base year of 1920, which you have to keep in your mind. So virtually you have lost about 2 years of growth rate because of your impact of the COVID. Only after this existing capacity and all are fulfilled, yes, there is a absolutely excellent pickup in the economy from the lows of like say 2021. But if you have the 1920 of the as the base rate and all, you will be seeing the growth only in the 21-22. You see my point. So so we have to wait and watch. Though there is pickup from the lows of the financial year 2021, if you take 1920 as the basis, the overall the yearly figures of 1920 will be, I mean, 1920-21 will be lower than 1920, and 21-22 will show excellent growth rate compared to the financial year 2021, but it will be almost equal to whatever you saw in your financial year 1920.
Okay, very well said. I buy your point and understand that the next year will be an excellent year. So does that mean the current demand which we are seeing is absolutely sustainable?
Definitely sustainable, but always remember that you are still below the reference year of 1920 activity level and overall production.
Right. So one or two more point apart from the demand now. I will leave that segment. Specifically, now we are going to close the March. So what kind of restructuring applications have you received, and how do you see going to close March quarter in terms of the restructuring applications? How do you see going ahead in that segment?
Along with our second and third quarterly calls and our records on the public domain, we will be closing the financial year 19-20-21 with a restructured portfolio of about 5 to 6 or 5 to 5.5% sort of. And we will be fulfilling that expectations, and it will be around that number when we close the financial year 2021.
Sir, I will also divert your focus specifically at the IBC. Do you see a deluge of cases going to IBC? What kind of cases you are, have shortlisted specifically for IBC or NCLT going ahead?
See, there are two factors which you have to look into. You also need to look into, along with the, let's say, the expected final judgment from the Supreme Court. When Supreme Court allows, like say, NPA marking can start. That is one point which is still pending. So what is going to happen is that there is sufficient time has been given. You are, like say, the incremental slippages is going to be slightly over and above the normal. Say, for example, during the pre-COVID years, in the financial year 18-19, we had about 2 to 2.25% of slippage to the closing advances. For 19-20, 21, 19-20 also, 2019-20 also, we had a slippage ratio of about 3% or so. For the current year also, we expect the pro forma to be around 3% or slippage or so. So the first deluge into the IBC will be from the accounts which are already declared as NPA for 31st March 2020 itself, and the deluge from the accounts from the fresh cases which are yet to be declared as NPA post Supreme Court judgment. You will also be having. It is nothing but over a period of, like say, 1 year or 1.5 years, whatever backlog that was there, they will be immediately getting added to your IBC and all. Since our focus is more on the SME lending, and most of the cases we are the sole banker with the total control over the assets and cash flows for our borrowers. Most of our resolution plans are basically like recovery measures are through the SARFAESI action more than the IBC.
Sir, could you also, I mean, it's a valid point that you mentioned here that you would like to, prefer SARFAESI more than the IBC. Could you demystify why? Because I will tell you, when I was talking to a lot of bankers very recently, they also said that, IBC should have focused more on the resolution, but that is not happening. And liquidation cases are rising a lot, which is not helping the bankers. Is that also your view, sir?
See here, finally, what it like say decides what is the percentage haircut and what is the percentage recovery is what is the skin the respective borrower has in that when the account has become bad. The what happens is that when you are when you want to sell as a going concern, and when there is a sufficient value there in that overall asset, particularly the unit per se, IBC is more preferable. Whenever, like say, the skin in the game by the borrower is less, probably, and you have, like say, assets apart from the unit, like the personal assets of the borrower, SARFAESI is better.
So, one or two more questions specifically about the bad bank and the DFI. To start with the bad bank, how do you think, or in your view, how do you think the bad bank should function?
You already have a lot of, like say, successful ARCs. Like say, a few ARCs are doing exceptionally fine, and a few ARCs are not doing that good. The difference lies basically in, like say, how that particular ARC approaches the resolution. Basically, if you look at honestly, the like say the charges what banks are paying for the ARCs, it is nothing but the rent you are paying for the holding that bad assets in the balance sheet, if you look in that perspective. So if the ARCs have like say sufficient system to take decisions, quick decisions, taking into account like say without having any fear for any what you call if they take a honest decision, if things are fine, that is the requirement particularly for the bad bank which is being thought about at that point of time. You need a proper system, proper committee, proper persons who will be applying their mind, who can take quick decisions basically coming on the proposals that are coming to them.
So yeah, and also, sir, one of the very important question is specifically about the DFI. The amount which the government of India has allocated for the DFI, and also the ambitious plan which they have formed, crafted specifically for this. How it is going to help the banks, because infrastructure was one of the biggest worry in terms of the funding. So do you see some partnerships, collaborations over there going ahead?
See, the if you look into the history of DFIs in the last 50 years or so, almost all the like say great institutions which came up in late 60s and I mean in 60s and 70s, the purpose was for almost like say they were all term lending institutions basically. They were doing for both industry and also for the infrastructure, and the banks were restricting themselves purely for the working capital purposes.
Right.
So subsequently, in the after the liberalization and all, it was felt that some of them, like say, they became like say the concept of financial supermarket when the borders between the banks and DFIs got merged. So banks started becoming the lenders of both the term loans and also for the working capital. Which almost you saw now, like say the full circle has come. Basically, the limitations of the banks, particularly in like say generating resources for a long-term requirements. Say, for example, you need 10, 15, 20 years of funding for infrastructure facilities. But the capacity of the banks to raise the capital was more on the resources was more for like say short to medium term, at the best not more than 5 years. So if you, I mean, this is the very important step that has been now taken. And this particular capital can be leveraged to gain maybe 3 times of that or 4 times of that, or depending upon the risk bearing capacity of that, and probably the government thing and all, which will make like say a lot of money available for the infrastructure things. And you need you have larger gestation period from the infrastructure to get sufficient cash flow. In fact, bulk of the NPAs which came in the previous like say economic cycle, particularly on the consortiums and infrastructure, was mainly on the mismatch in the repayment terms that was fixed and the actual cash flow, because the gestation period and all were not properly calculated. And I think sufficient learning should have happened on like say how to structure those projects so that they will be performing technically, and also they will be developing infrastructure for the country in long term, which could unlock the potential of future growth and all. And I think the learnings of the past have been sufficiently taken into account in making these things for the future. And it will quicken the time taken required for the country to become a developed country per se.
Okay. So thanks for that note. One important question that I have is specifically about the privatization. That is a burning topic right now. In fact, a lot of, PSB banks are also, talking against government. What is the view that you carry about the privatization?
See, the ultimately, what is needed for any commercial organization is whether the organization is able to generate return more than the cost of capital. At the same time, when India, like say, went through, like say, post-independence, if you had a chance to look into the development of banking in the country, so the oldest bank today, say for example, State Bank of India was promoted as colonial banks, Bank of Bengal, Bank of Bombay, and Bank of Madras, which merged to become Imperial Bank, and later which became State Bank of India. And initial period, the purpose was to fund the activities of the British East India Company. The second set of banks which were functioning in the country were in fact foreign banks, like your French bank, which is currently your BNP Paribas, or your Standard Chartered Bank, which was at that point of time Chartered Bank of India, Australia, and China, or something like that. And probably the oldest bank which was promoted in India was your Allahabad Bank, which finally got merged with your Indian Bank. Oldest surviving Indian bank today is your like say Punjab National Bank, started in 1805. And next in seniority comes our own City Union Bank, which was promoted as the Kumbakonam Bank. So the purpose of all these banks at that point of time was to get your resources for the common cause, particularly to support the industry growth and commerce growth and things like that. The banks like Punjab National Bank or City Union Bank and all, when we were promoted by the Indians, we were the oldest banks which are promoted by the Indians to support the local agriculture and the commerce. And you had a set of banks which were promoted by the Maharajas, which became the subsidiaries of State Bank of India, or banks like Bank of Baroda, and many subsidiaries of almost all subsidiaries of State Bank of India got merged with the State Bank of India. You had banks which are promoted by the industrialists, which are like say Birla's promoted UCO Bank, Tata's had say in the banks like a Central Bank of India or to some extent in Bank of India and things like that. You had Tapas had in your Oriental Bank of Commerce. Like that, Indian Bank and Indian Overseas Banks and all were promoted by Chettiars, big industrial groups. And there was a feeling when India was going through the path of your socialistic path, the nationalization was very much needed at that particular point of time, was to take the banks to the common man at that point of time and to have equitable access of capital to the all different spectra in the country as a whole. So for many years, it functioned well and it was needed. And after the liberalization happened, you are continuously seeing that, like say, the government-owned banks were, like say, losing their market share, and the amount of return that they were able to generate and all were not able to match the cost of capital. And repeated shareholders' money was needed at this particular point of time. But if you look in our country, particularly with as diverse as 130 crore population, you need both a few private sector, public sector banks, and also you need private sector banks. As like say the country has a diverse set of population, I won't say that all the banks need to be privatized or all the banking system to be with the government and all. You can definitely see the confidence level the public has with the public sector banks, particularly placing deposits and all, is definitely worth mentioning at that point of time. So you need a judicious mix of both public sector bank and private sector banks, and public sector banks definitely had like say skill sets which had got institutional building over a period of time. So whenever, like say, any government-owned banks which is not able to generate a sufficient return to take care of the cost of capital over a longer period of time, definitely it will be felt that it is unfair to expect taxpayers to bail them out on a continuous basis, and at some point of time, they may have to be privatized. But I am a voter of, like say, public sector banks, and you always need a robust public sector banking system. And the public sector banking system, after adjusting for the like say support they do for the country at large for a national building purposes, particularly for rural banking and all, where some amount of compromise is being made on the return on capital. After adjusting for all those things, they should also be generating sufficient return to take care of their cost of capital. This is my view.
Okay, noted, sir. In fact, very detailed one. Before I wrap up or before I let you go, one important or a soft question specifically, because you are going to complete 1 year this week itself of the lockdown. What are your top 3 learnings of this 1 year, and how do you see the next year going ahead?
Honestly speaking, at operational level, we understood we were doing many things which could have been done much simpler. Say, for example, we could see because of the digitization and other things, even before the pre-COVID, almost 88% of the transactions had moved to the non-branch channel. And after the COVID, we could see that improving to 93 to 95%, which means 50% reduction at the operational workload, which we have been doing. Like say earlier, even there were a lot of resistance from the customers in reducing this workload, but some amount of persuasion definitely, like say, convinced the customers, and it is improving efficiency at the bank level. This is one thing. Second learning is that knowingly or unknowingly, we had been doing something right, that we had to acknowledge, particularly in our customer selection and all such things. Third important thing is that our stress on the, particularly the focus at the operational level on the collections and like say the demand collections, we used to have some amount of follow-up on a quarterly basis to some extent, which we had to strictly get into a continuous basis, is a major learning that has happened during this COVID.
Okay, great, sir. So thank you so much for sharing your input, sir. Thank you so much for talking to ETB FSI.
Yeah,
thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.